Hello, I'm Gretchen Sable. I'm president of League of Women Voters, and I want to welcome you to our program for November 9th. I'm going to start off with a little reading here, a paragraph from League of Women Voters of the United States. They sent a notice out to all the members, and this is the final paragraph. As we look to the weeks and months ahead, our nation must begin the process of reconciliation and seek to identify those things that bind us together rather than divide us. In this moment, we must come together as Americans, respect the process, and work toward a peaceful transition of power. And so with that, we have Sue Butler with us tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to Sue here. Sue's going to talk to us about how to begin that process of rebuilding and finding ways to talk to people that we haven't been talking to for a while. Sue?
Hi. Leslie, do you want to share my screen since I can't? My name is Sue Butler. I am the program planning chair of the ABC League, and tonight we're going to be talking about building communities. There we go. Building a community of common understanding needs to be a goal that we establish. Our country is so divided. Next screen. We have one nation. We have at least two parties. Many people in our country are polarized. They don't see any common ground. They don't seek it. We have family members that aren't talking to each other. We have neighbors that turn their back on each other. Next screen. But that isn't really a way for us to live. So we need to build a bridge, and we need to be able to find a way to meet in the middle. Next screen. I'm going to tell you that building a bridge is really hard work. And go ahead, next screen, Leslie. It really involves listening. Listening respectfully is really, really hard. We just tend to listen enough to have the right-hand column that says why this is what you're listening to is just full of malarkey. And we dismiss the comments and we move on. We only tend to talk to people that we agree with, and we avoid talking to those with whom we disagree. So I want you to tell you a couple stories about how hard listening is. I've had opportunities when I was still working in some leadership training, and one day I was in training with a superintendents from across the United States, and some other people that from Anoka County. And we were entering what's called a dialogue. And a dialogue is where you listen actively and you respond very reflectively and neutrally so that you are really understanding that person. So the superintendent that was sitting to my right said, "Well, it's not true that all kids can learn." Of its own accord, my right hand reached out and grabbed his tie. I have never been so embarrassed in my entire life. Well, I may have been, but I'm not telling you. It was the first off. It was the beginning of the dialogue, and I had this massive failure at the get-go. So do you want to go to the next slide, Leslie? So it is really hard. It's really hard, and I think we have to get in touch with what those core values are, because when someone runs over your core value, it does hurt. And I think knowing what they are, and sometimes we don't, we're not always aware until somebody smacks us with that, a violation of our core value. So when you are listening, you need to maintain a face that says, "I seek to understand you. I want to understand you." You listen without interruption. That's really hard too, because boy, you got to tell them how wrong they are. And you need to keep a neutral face or a positive face, and you need to nod your head to indicate you're still with them. You're not off in la la land. They've made a point, and you acknowledge it. It's a neutral process. Go ahead, Leslie. So Neutral questions are these. Can you help me understand? What brings you to this point of view, or your point of view? Can you tell me more? So if you don't ask a neutral question, you are declaring a judgment. And that's really important to understand, that if you know, it's a parental thing too. When we're parenting our children, very rarely are our questions neutral. They tend to be pretty much of an indictment on whatever has just occurred. And so really working to reflect on what questions you have and how you can frame those without offending the speaker is a trick. This is kind of like a 1,000-foot overview. I spent weeks at this. I do want you to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because as miserable as I was at the beginning of this process where I'm grabbing some guy's tie, my children actually ended up asking me to conduct dialogues with some of their friends where they were having conflict. And my son had me conduct one with a teacher. So it can be done. It just takes a little bit of work. I also did at one time when I was working in the school district, we had a lot of issues with kids with emotional behavioral disorders. And there was finger pointing from every single side on the compass. It was everybody's fault. Parents' fault, teachers' fault, administrators' fault. I don't know. If there was somebody's fault, it could be that also was blamed. And we decided that we would conduct a dialogue and have groups of all of the stakeholders. But you had to agree to come for 3 days, and you had to, because all the administrators said, well, I'll come when the principals are going to talk. Yeah, no, you have to come and listen. And it was a profound experience in the school district, and the generalized anger and frustration and finger pointing was substantially diminished, and it ended up being a really good experience for everyone. So I would just encourage you that even though it's hard work, it can be done. Next slide. So I said this, a neutral question indicates to the speaker that you really do want to understand them. You're not judging them. You aren't making a declaration against their point of view. You're just trying to find out more information. And you know, I was listening to some television this morning, and somebody said, you know, no one has ever learned anything talking. And that's a pretty profound way to realize, you think that too, is that when we are talking, we are not learning, we are just regurgitating. Move the slide, Leslie, thanks. So respectful listening in itself is an engaged and creative act. It's a talent. It's not something that you can just, oh, I'm doing this tomorrow. And I expect as we engage in this, that we might fail. I hope you don't grab anybody's tie, but understand that there's a lot of emotion behind the issues that we're talking and listening about. And so we just have to try our best and offer the fact that we are legitimately attempting to understand, and that we are going to fail sometimes, but we can always go back and say, look, let's try that again. Okay, next slide. So when you're talking, when you have the speaker's stick, speak from your heart. Look at the person that you're talking to and avoid provocative language. So one of the things that I often say, and you will all have heard me say this, I'm sure, well, that's stupid. Okay, that's a thing you don't say. But I do tend to do that amongst friends. But when you're really talking about issues that are sensitive, you really need to keep a lid on the language and be very respectful. Next slide. If we do that hard work of listening, we'll find common ground. It may be starting in little bits and slivers, but we will find it. And we can achieve that the common ground of understanding and build on it. It's just beginning and then continuing. Bridge building takes a little bit of time. Next slide. So that is how we can come to some common understanding by working on listening, active listening, and building that common understanding, which I really feel that as such a nation that is so divided, it is essential for us to do. So we can put that away, and then are there any questions or comments? Oh, I did just want you to know the importance of neutral questions. There was a source there. If any of you want me to send you this, I can. Just send me your email and I'll send it out. So, is there any questions or comments?
What if one side really does not want to listen, you know, as much as you can? It seems like one side is not reaching out. How can you engage those people then?
Well, I think that you can listen to them. I mean, they're not going to reach out to hear you, but maybe you can hear them. And maybe you can gain some understanding of why they think the way they think. What is it that has them, what is the root of the point of view that they have? And then there may not be anything to build in that individual. You're not going to be building a bridge with every single person, because there are some people who are not in the mood and who just are angry and who don't want to invest. But there are a ton of people who feel like me. I feel like we have to do this. I feel like this work is as important as the work that many of us did on the election. That we are so divided and so polarized. And maybe we've been this way before, but I'm not hearing that from historians. I've not read anything about that. And it quite frankly, it frightens me. It frightens me for our country. So I'm very invested in doing this work. And luckily I have had some experience, but recognizing that I started from this massive failure should help give you confidence that you can do better. So anybody else?
I heard a quote on NPR when they were trying to discuss some of the same issues, trying to reach out and find common ground with people. And it was attributed to Abraham Lincoln. And he said, I don't like that person. I need to get to know them better. And again, it might just be that we have to listen, and they might not be ready to listen to us, but we can listen to them.
Right. And you know, it can be a short discussion. You have to build skills in this area and start with reasonable goals, and just start with listening, and that I think can build us some understanding, and maybe some understanding that we haven't had, that we really can reach out.
I also heard from a different source, just in phrasing and talking and listening to other people, is not, when you disagree, not to say no, but
Right.
but
Yes.
kind of agree. Yes, you know, basically you're agreeing, you understood them, and yes, and
Right.
trying to at least share your point of view rather than,
Or as we say in Minnesota, Susan, yabbit. Yabbit. Yeah. So
yeah.
yes,
But you don't want to have the but, you want to,
have
and
like,
you're presenting, it's a it's not negating their feelings, their thoughts, but presenting yours.
Right. Essential.
Sue, I think it's important if we do want to make a connection with another person, is looking them in the eyes and communicate that without even saying a word, that we want to make a connection with another human being. And I think that's extremely important. No eye rolling, no shaking your head when they say something you don't agree with. I think that neutral face is extremely important. We have to watch our vocabulary too. There are buzzwords uh, that we use to, if we're not talking to that group, to describe that group to maybe some of our friends. We don't want to use those buzzwords. We want to just use as neutral language as we possibly can. We don't even want to say progressive or too conservative. Those labels don't belong in a conversation when you're trying to understand, to really make a connection. That's been my experience. There's so many people in my family who had a different point of view, and I didn't want to not be talking to people in my family. So um, even during the debates on TV, when one person was listening to the other person speak, it's always wise not to roll your eyes or shake your head. Um, it's it's that's not respectful listening. So thank you for these tips.
A friend of mine told me, she and I had different points of view, and she told me later that I rolled. Well, that's why I was been afraid to be a moderator, because I tend to be a little bit expressive, and and um, and so I was completely unaware of it, and you just got to get a grip on your face. That's
Mhm.
really it. And
Yep.
and that can be a bigger challenge for some than others. So, Linda, I can't hear you, Linda. Are you muted? I can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Okay, I just did. I
There you
didn't
go.
know it was in my control.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that I have to really work on too, besides the face, is my hands and arms. And so I found it's helpful to me if I try and open up my stance, even if I'm sitting, open
Okay.
up my arms, put my palms up. And
So,
it's funny. It's funny how even if, it's like when you're on the phone, if you need to be nice to somebody, one way is to smile because it makes you sound nicer. And that's the open arms thing works with me when I'm talking with somebody and having a hard time just being calm and open. That's all.
that's a good point. Another thing that I've been accused of is sighing. Like, now I have asthma, so I do have a good excuse for that. But again, I'm not aware of this. So, and this one person had told me that, and I've done a lot of speaking. So I don't know that I do sigh a lot. I have asthma. It's a defensible position. I'm sticking with it. But you don't want to do it you have to be somewhat aware, or if you are having trouble, explain. I'm having asthma. Going to be some heavy breathing here. Jody? No? Okay. Yep. Sandy?
I think that what you've brought up here brings up another point. When the person that you are communicating with does some of these things, has some of these mannerisms, sighs, rolls their eyes, or whatever, I think we have to remember to cut them a little slack, that they may not be aware of what they're doing, or they may not mean by it what we think they mean by it. So let's try to remember a little tolerance for the fact that other people, we might be reading things into it that aren't what they intended to put there.
Yeah,
Another-
Sandy makes a really good point. We all need to give each other some grace in dealing with things, and just remember that sometimes people are in different positions than we are, and they react as they do, and you just have to kind of find them where they are and find the way to build with them from there.
Anybody else? Yep, Suze.
Just to share a personal experience, the representative in my district is the opposing party. And over the past 2 years, we have sat down for coffee together quite a few times just to talk and get to know one another. And I have found that to be very beneficial, even though I disagree with most of the way he votes. The concern I have right now, during this election season, I happen to be the campaign manager for the person who is running against him in our district. And I was very careful not to make any personal statements at all about John. And it's, I don't know how uncomfortable it's going to be. I did reach out to him just today to see if he thought we'd still be able to continue our coffee meetings, or if he would feel that would be too uncomfortable because of the position I took with this election season. So I'm waiting to hear from him.
Well, almost everybody is on an opposite side of something, and hopefully we can work our way through. I hope that your coffees continue.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
And I think reaching out, again, it's just reach out. And I think sometimes it's just that starts with what Mary Jo said, it starts with that eye contact and a smile, and it maybe builds to that conversation. It doesn't have to start. Of course, it's a little hard to have eye contact and a smile now because
Yeah.
well, I live alone. I don't know about you guys. So I can have eye contact. This is the most eye contact I have ever. And I have grown so to hate this. So it's a very interesting time, but we will be able to see other people and we will be able to have conversation. And maybe it's on Zoom, maybe it's in person, but building coalitions with people that right now may not perceive us to be friends, that's the thing we should be doing. So I don't have anything else to say unless if anybody else has a comment. Zilla, do you have any wisdom to share? Oh, you're on mute. Zilla, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
All right, well,
There you go. Now you're on mute again. Can you?
Yeah.
I can hear you. We got the help.
Well, finally a little thing popped up. So,
There you go.
so anyway, I'm usually pretty good at listening, but even when you're listening, it's hard to keep your face neutral. That's something that one person needs to practice, I think. At least I find that. I don't like to argue with people. I want to just let them know I'm listening. But then it's hard to really be neutral, I think, very hard.
Just takes
So
practice.
do you have any tips for me?
I gave you all I got. Well, I have more, but
Okay.
I didn't want it to be like, I mean, I did a lot of leadership training through the Bush Fellowship, and other organizations that I was just blessed to be able to be a part of in my position with the school districts that I worked for. So, and they somehow wanted me to be able to communicate. I don't get it. But so that was an incredible blessing for me. And it actually impacted my parenting. It impacted every aspect of my life. And I am eternally grateful for it. It was not easy, but it came for the most part, I guess. When I'm aware that I am doing something other than like talking to a relative that I disagree with, apparently I am disrespectful sometimes. So I need to monitor that. That's an area that I learned about myself.
The other hard thing is to not avoid people that you don't want to talk to. I mean, you can be in a situation where it's important to be sociable and, and contribute and all that sort of thing. You really don't want to, but then you need to sound genuine, and it can be difficult.
That is true. That is true.
Sue,
Yep.
I think another tip is that you don't have to start out your contact with the person you're trying to reach some little common humanity with. You can always start with something you share in common. We're all human beings. Someone likes gardening, and you know that, or someone has a sports jacket on. You can always find some little contact, or somebody's got a teacup collection like my grandmother. Whatever allows them to be human and doesn't um, uh, so you don't have to confront someone that you want to make a connection with. And I think that's a better thing, because you can have other conversations in the future. You're not trying to um, talk politics all the time. So I think make that human connection, whatever comes to you. If you're really trying to connect with somebody, there is something about them. They have grandchildren, or they belong to the same church or something. And I think that's the best way to start, not with some confrontational subject. And you'll find that there is something that you share. That's what I've done a number of times when we have to go lobby for our conservation causes.
Okay. And lobbying is a way of having to talk and listen, and would be perfect practice for this stuff. Yeah. And you're right. You can't start. You can't. Well, let's just talk about the election. No, you really have to build on the tiny slivers that you can build on.
Right.
And that is that you share, that you both have grandchildren, that you both belong to the Y, you both, you both were teachers, whatever. And you can build on common experiences.
Right.
That may lead to different decision making on our parts, but there is a lot of common ground.
Mm-hmm.
That was a door that could use some WD-40.
I have a whole house that could use some WD-40. So come over with a can of it sometime.
I'd love,
I need some.
I have
I'd love to go any place, really. I'm just not allowed.
I have some joints that could use WD-40.
I do too. I do too.
And thank you so much for doing this tonight.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yep.
Thank you. Well done.